Hey guys, James here again, and today I want to talk about Timberborn, a new beaver-based city building survival game. The game at the time of this review is currently in early access, so I won't be doing a full review just yet, but I just want to discuss some of the cool ideas and mechanics, as well as potential areas for improvement. So in Timberborn, you run a settlement of beavers, and just look at these guys. How can you not love this game? Like other city builders and colony sims, you set up housing, food, and other living amenities to keep your beavers happy and to grow your population and expand your city. The game also has some pretty hardcore survival elements, with one of the main gameplay loops revolving around droughts. Basically, your settlement has to deal with ever-increasing droughts which take away your access to water, so you need to make sure that you have enough food and water to sustain your colony through hard times. The game also has some almost resource management automation mechanics similar to a Factorio style game, where you need to plan out your buildings and districts in order to run as efficiently as possible. So one of the biggest characteristics I would use to describe this game is Zen. It has a bit of a slower pace, and in general, it's very focused on the macro level. Currently, I think there aren't a lot of things you need to micromanage other than maybe tweaking how many workers you want at certain buildings, and some people may like or dislike that. In fact, because of this lack of micromanagement, I found myself usually playing on the fastest speed possible. As I mentioned before, one of the biggest parts of the game is surviving the droughts which occur throughout the game, and as such, management of water is one of the most important parts of the game. In general, the only fertile land will be land located next to water sources such as rivers and lakes. However, by using dynamite and dams, you can terraform the land around you in order to set up reserves for your colony and irrigate the land. I really like this mechanic, and I also really like how visual the whole process is. One other very interesting and unique aspect they introduced to the game is the ability to build very vertically. There are some buildings which you can build on top of, as well as platforms you can set up which allow you to further build things on top. And again, I really like this as I don't really know many city building games which allow you to have such vertical setups. It's usually just one building per spot. The only thing that can be a bit tricky with this is how to set up stairs and whatnot, and I've had beavers get stuck in random areas while trying to traverse the map. I think a ladder would be a nice addition instead of having to use stairs all the time. I think the ability to terraform and build vertically makes the game surprisingly deep. Of course, it's only early access, but at the current moment, I would say there aren't that many buildings available as of yet. But even then, with the ability to really shape your settlement how you want it, I think there is a lot of freedom for creativity. If you're anything like me and enjoy browsing a game's subreddit, you'll feel shockingly inept as you look at other people's setups and wonder, oh dear god, how did they even think of this? It's truly impressive how crazy some players can get in the game. One of the areas I have some mixed feelings on are the district and pathing mechanics. Basically, you create district centers which determine the borders of how far your beavers will be able to travel. Based on where you set up different buildings as well, your beavers will have limitations on how far they can work and reach. Therefore, in order to increase the range of your settlement, you need to set up different districts with their own centers, gates, and limitations. I actually do think it's a really interesting mechanic, but it can be a bit tricky to actually set up, and maybe could use some improvements. For one thing, when setting up a new district, you sort of need to completely set up the district to be somewhat self-sustaining before you migrate any of your population to the new district. Otherwise, you may risk your beavers dying off in an apparent suicide cult. This can be a bit tricky because of the border limits of your original district, but expansion can become very necessary as you attempt to find additional resources and land. This can be somewhat remedied with your transport points which allow you to ship goods between districts, but I do just find myself wishing that maybe beavers could go between districts more freely. I still do like the system, but do think there are some tweaks that could be made. I'm also not a huge fan of how the power system works, really only because of all the power shafts being above ground, so it does require some planning. What's nice though is that adjacent buildings will transfer power to each other, so you can set up one power grid for all your electric buildings. You have water wheels which are limited by droughts, windmills which are limited by wind, as well as beaver wheels which are the weakest but the most consistent as you can employ workers to power them, which is also just so darn cute. This actually creates an interesting problem where you need to figure out how best to power and back up your buildings. Finally, I think there are just some improvements in terms of animation and quality of life that could be improved. Overall, I do think the presentation is good, although obviously with a lot of room to grow, but I do wish the beavers had some more animations. Currently, they kind of just grab and rub things as they're working on them, and it'd be nice to be able to see more, such as them gnawing at trees and whatnot. I think there are also some quality of life improvements that definitely need to be added to the game, and of course, with it still being in early access, I'd assume these will be added at some point. For example, right now they're missing multiple building selection, building a copy of the currently selected building, an easier way of finding specific structures, mirroring buildings, and maybe even the ability to relocate already built structures. I think one other really useful feature would also be specifying activity when in a drought versus during normal times. But again, these are just some really early thoughts. I haven't even gotten that far into the game yet, but I did want to talk about it because I have been enjoying it. Overall, it's a pretty relaxing game, and I do think they introduced some pretty cool mechanics. I'm pretty sure they'll be adding more buildings and new factions of beavers into the game as time goes on, so I'm excited to see where Timberborn goes. But let me know what you think. Have you tried Timberborn, and what'd you think of it? And of course, if you enjoyed the video, please do consider hitting that like and subscribe button to help out the channel. And as usual, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.